Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Good morning and welcome to Still Growing in Grace. My name is Mike Zenker, and I'm glad you're taking time to join me today, either live or watching this a little later. I think it's going to be a great conversation for those of you who know Paul Gray. Paul Gray was a good friend. He had many good friends all around the world, actually, and he passed away not long ago, and my heart's still really sad about it. So anyway, something happened. We lost a good friend recently, connected to a number of other friends of mine online, and a person I never met in person, but I did meet Paul, and it made me think of him and his story. And I looked back through all my episodes of Still Growing in Grace, and we only have one time that we aired this interview of him sharing part of his story, his testimony, and he was one of the guys that encouraged me that God's still at work doing stuff. Because sometimes I think I'm in the church world. You don't see people come to Jesus the traditional way so much anymore, and so you think, is God still getting people's attention? I instead see people growing and maturing. Like, that's very exciting too. And so just my lens of what I see and what catches my attention. So I wanted you to hear Paul's story of how God got his attention, which gives me great hope that God's big enough to get our attention. So let's take a look at this wonderful interview. This was recorded 3 years ago, so a great time back then. So let me just get this rolling. I think you'll really enjoy this. Here we go. I heard your story, and could you give us a little bit of your faith journey, and make sure you slip in that musician part, because I love it. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from.
Well, I grew up in a little town down on the edge of the Ozarks in Missouri. I came to the University of Kansas here in Lawrence in 1965. I met my wife, Kitsy, here. We got married right before graduation in 1969, so we'd almost been married 51 years now. And we had 3 wonderful kids and 6 great grandkids. 2 of our kids and their kids live here in Lawrence, where we do, and the others in South Carolina, so we don't get to see them quite as often, but we get to do a lot of Zoom stuff with them. My initial career was in music, and I did several different things with that. And then after 20 years or so, I really came up empty, and that's when I met a guy who I liked him. I liked everything about him. People liked him. He was a funny guy, good businessman and stuff. And I started hanging out with him, and I asked him, I told him one day, guy just was so empty. I said, Glenn, I want what you have. And he said, well, I'm a Christian. And I said, well, I am too. I go to church. I vote Republican. I recycle. What else is there? That's literally what I said to it. Wow. So, at any rate, he said, no, I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And that was in, I don't know, in the early 1980s. And I'd never heard that term before. It scared me. I was thinking of Moonies with shaved heads at the airports, handing out stuff. And, but I was so empty. I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, do you have a Bible in today's language? And I didn't know they had them. All I knew was when I was a kid, King James. And I said, oh, I didn't know they had them. And he said, well, he told me what to get. I got one. He said, and just read that every day, start in the book of John, and ask Jesus if he's there to speak to you. So I did, and Jesus started speaking to me. And over the course of a couple of years, did
he sound like Charlton Heston?
Well, yeah, but with a Spanish accent.
Oh!
No, I'm kidding. So at any rate, after it took me a couple of years to divest myself of some business interest and things, and then I was discipled by a navigator. I went on staff at a church here in Lawrence as a music minister and evangelism pastor because I was on fire. And we then started our church about, 29 years ago. And a handful of us. And that church is still going. And then after about 20 years of that, I got a book in the mail called The Rest of the Gospel. And I don't know.
I have that book.
Yeah, I don't know who sent it to me or why. There was no return address, but I started reading it. That was the first time I'd really heard about grace.
Wow.
There was a chapter in it on grace that was totally different than anything I had ever thought about. And that really changed my life. And then somebody told me about Steve McVeigh, and I started reading his books and listening to him. He introduced me to Baxter Kruger. I mean, then I got to know Steve, and he introduced me to Baxter Kruger and then Don Keithley and Paul Young and you and, several others. And so for the last 10 or 11 years, it's just been a wonderful journey in grace and inclusion, finished work of Jesus. And I'm still finding out every day that God's better than I thought he was the day before.
That to me is the difference of this grace journey is God's getting bigger and better all the time. Our understanding is being expanded. I love it. That's really cool. Yeah.
So that's what we had a nice little church here of about 250 people, and we'd started along with the doctor and a nurse, it started a medical clinic for people without insurance, which is still going. I'm not involved with it anymore, but the church was doing a lot of neat things, and I started on the grace journey, and I preached it down from 250 to about 125 over the course of a couple of years. And then when I started learning about inclusion and that Jesus died for everybody and everybody was included, I preached it down to about 25. But that group is we've got a really strong, great group of people here who've been with us, and we enjoy doing life together. And then, of course, a big part of my ministry now is online and with some books that I've written and things. So it's been a great journey.
Especially in the last 3 or 4 weeks, right?
Well, yeah, it's changed a little bit then. One of the great benefits of this is I get to spend a lot more time with my wife, and we do a lot more things together, and we've enjoyed that. And our daughter and her son, our grandson, live with us too. And so the four of us have been doing a lot of neat things together. Kitsy and Jody teach our grandson. They're both teachers to begin with. And so we have a schoolroom set up, and they have 3 or 4 lessons a day. And we go for walks and play games and watch movies. And that part of it has been good. But I certainly do miss being out and being with people.
Wow. Now, when I met you, you played an instrument I've never seen before. I've seen the instrument, but not set up the way you have it. Tell us about your music background.
Well, I started out with trumpet. I was a trumpet player. I played piano and drums and as well. But the band that I had and led, I was a trumpet player. But I also play valve trombone. What you saw is valve trombone.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it was a popular instrument back in 100 years ago and up into the 1930s, but sort of fell out of favor. If you can play trumpet, you can play valve trombone. The fingering's the same. It's just an octave lower. And it's physically, it's easier for me to play. I don't have to practice. I can play it.
Well, you don't hit anybody in the head either.
Yeah, right. So it's so it's a lot easier for me to play, and I still get to play. I play not now because it's closed, but normally I play on Thursday nights at the local American Legion here with a group of guys that are all older than me, and we're all guys who used to play, for a living or had bands. We know all the old songs, and people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We have one lady who's 104 who comes and dances.
Oh my!
And we play, music from the 40s and 50s and the big band era type thing. And so that's a little outlet for me to play. And I play sometimes on the videos that I do online too. So still get to do that.
That'd be cool. I haven't seen any of your online videos, but I think that right now that could be really encouraging as a mode of encouragement or escape for folks, right? When they're stuck at home, stuck at their computers, especially when the weather turns bad. Yesterday it was really gray here, and so I know.
Is there something wrong with gray?
Ha! Oh no. Sorry, Paul Gray. It was in Grey, and I just you kind of sensed it was a emotionally tougher for folks. You know,
Sure.
not only can't they go out, but now the sky is not encouraging.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, we've kind of gotten past that. It's yesterday it was 80 here, and we haven't had any clouds in the sky for 2 or 3 days, and it'll probably be 78 or so again today. But that just happened recently, and a week ago or so, you know, it was rainy and dreary and gray. And actually, Kitsy and I both talked about that. It just when you have to be inside and you look outside and it's gray and dreary, it kind of amplifies that. But I tell you what, Mike, I don't know. I can't imagine going through this. Now, people do, of course, people do, but I can't imagine going through this and not knowing who God is and who I am and who everybody else is in God's sight. I mean, if I didn't have that ultimate hope and know that He's got this. And He's with me and He's in me and He's working out all things for the good. If I didn't know that, it's hard to imagine how I would cope with this. And I, you know, that's just
well, let me
for
throw,
me.
Let me throw a twist into this. The way you said that, I know your background. I know what you've come to discover and are still discovering. But I got a lot of joy boy Christians who say, I've got Jesus, I'm okay. I'm not going to get the virus. I've got Jesus, I'm covered by His blood, and all those weird sayings. And so their picture of who they think God is very different from how you have come to see God. What has been some of the stark differences from the God you thought you knew to the God you're discovering? What were there any key points that were a switch where you went, wait a minute, that I thought that, whoa, now I see this. This is so much better. What could you recall some of those key things at this point?
Well, which one of the 49,823 would you like me to focus on? You know, I grew up in a my folks were wonderful, and we grew up in a nice little town, and you know, a lot of our life centered around church. It was it was a very legalistic church, and I grew up unfortunately in a denomination that taught that you could lose your salvation if you and so we were taught that God was just always watching over us, you know. And my folks again, who yeah, and again, my folks were wonderful folks, but they would say to me, they'd say to me, look, Paul, when you go out and play with your friends and stuff like that, you know, don't, you know, watch what you say and what you do, because God's watching you all the time. And then, of course, if you screw up, or if you don't, after you screw up, if you don't pray and ask for forgiveness and you die, you know, if I die before I sleep, you know, that kind of thing. Well, the first big revelation that I had was that that's not true. You know, I started when I became a pastor in the church I was at, they taught that too, but I was studying the Bible all the time. I was reading things about that just, and this was 30 years ago, that just jumped out at me that, you know, Jesus is the Savior of all people, you know, all are included, the restoration and all. And so well, no, I didn't get that at first, but the first thing I got was, no, you can't lose your salvation. He's not in and out and in and out and in and out. Doesn't depend on me. So that was a huge thing. And then once I started realizing that that everybody was, well, first, then when I started realizing that grace was way better than I thought it was, and that it literally included everything, and that there wasn't anything that I could do to make God love me any more or any less. That was huge. And the hugest thing for me was when I started, when I got the revelation of, well, that's true for everybody. That's not just true for me. And
But
so today,
who did you have the most kickback from for that one? Because if that's true, who's going to be most ticked off to hear that, or when you say that?
oh well, of course, religious people, and they're not the enemy. You know,
They're not.
they're just misinformed and ill advised. And you know, I was. You know, I was that way. I taught that kind of stuff, but I think that leads up to where we are today with the virus thing. If you believe that you're your own savior, and by that I mean something you did got you saved, and
Listen,
that
I said the perfect prayer many times.
Yeah, well, I heard you say that, and you missed one word, so I wouldn't sleep well if I were you tonight, especially in Canada, because I don't know. I don't even know if anybody in Canada is saved. You know, no, yeah, in that foolish, the kind of stuff that we thought. But if you thought that, as many of us did, that there was something that we did that got us right with God, and just like you said, well, of course, we did it right because, you know, our pastor and our teachers told us the right thing to say and do. Well, then you know, you just automatically think, well, those people didn't, and so they're not right. And then what the hardest all of this is the picture, the concept, of the perspective we have of God. When you come to understand that God is perfectly good and all good, there's no dark side to him, there's nothing bad to him, that God loves everyone, and that Jesus is the exact representation of God. When you start to realize that, then the angry God concept goes away, and you start peeling away the layers of all of that you thought, and so then you're no longer worried. You're able to see people as Jesus sees them, already included, already loved. Know that it's up to him and to his timing, and you don't have to worry about him. Well, that changes everything. But until you see that, if you think you got to do something, then people tend to exploit times like this and go to somebody who's worried about the virus already and say, well, if you were to get the virus and die tonight, do you know where you would go?
Oh my goodness.
And that kind of stuff is wow. And you know, and I see that stuff online, and I see people saying, well, you know, God caused all of this because yeah, all of that. So for one thing, my whole perspective is different, and I have that peace. You know, I don't care if I die today or tomorrow or whenever. That, you know, death affects the people who are still here. You know, and when our loved ones die, of course we're sad. We miss them and miss being with them and all of that. You know, and I'm not saying that I want to die, but I'm not worried about it, and I don't obsess over it. I really don't even think about it. However, if you don't have that concept, I think the basis of all fear, when you really get right down to it, is death. You know, if I get this virus and I die, then what happens?
So
or
the death isn't really the issue. It's actually destination obsession.
Destination, yeah. If I lose my business because of this and don't have enough money to pay my bills and provide for my family and food and stuff, and we die, then what? Now, I know I'm being overly dramatic there, but I think that's what it boils down to. And
you're not being overly dramatic, because everybody that's quarantined, their brains have nothing else to do but race ahead. And that's why I wanted to bring you on this morning to talk about that. You know, this whole crisis, and how do we keep our heads straight without going too crazy, you know?
Sure. Well, when we race ahead, and you know, I can do that with the best of them. I don't do it nearly as much as I used to, but you know, fear about something that we did in the past that might affect us with God, or worrying about something in the future, I found God is never in that picture. When I start to worry and catastrophize about the future or whatever, I don't think about God being in that picture. I mean, I just don't. And that's because he doesn't live in the future. He lives in the now. He's here with us now. And so when you start to worry about the future and you go down that trail, well, what if I get sick? What if I go to the hospital? What if my wife goes to the hospital and I can't even go visit her and she dies there and I can't go to the funeral and all of that? That's enough to just, I mean, thinking about things like that is going to take you down the tubes. Well, I don't want that to happen. I wouldn't like that to happen. I'd be sad if, obviously, if anything like that happened. But I'm not going to worry about that because I know God's with me. God's not going to protect me from getting the virus because, I spent an hour in my quiet time this morning or anything like that. I mean, stuff.
2 minutes short, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm kind of dieseling on here, but just the whole concept of knowing that God is good. He loves me. He loves everybody. He's working out all things for the good. The ultimate restoration of all things is going to happen. It just takes all the pressure off. And then I can go on and I can enjoy what I'm doing, even if I can't go out and do the things that I would normally like to do.
Do you think that our built-in cubby holes of expectations that we have in our minds contribute to the stress of fear right now? Like you just finished saying, oh, if I get sick, I want my loved one there, but they can't come. And if I die, they can't, there isn't a funeral. Those are all expectations that we say and have made up in our minds. These are things we ought to be able to do. And now the fear of those things potentially not happening create anxiety. So if I boil it down even more, I think expectations, personal ones, and mine are being revealed day by day. I think those are what's causing unnecessary stress. And we need to yield and surrender those things up and say, hang on, God, I know you got this. You're not absent from this problem, which religion will say God is absent because if you're good, he's with you. If you're bad, he's not with you, right? Because we have so much control of where God is.
Yeah.
What do you think of expectations there?
Well, no, I agree with you. What I'm learning to do, Mike, and what I think the biggest thing that I try to help people come to the realization of the truth of who God is, who they are, who everybody else is, and then to live life as Jesus did by taking everything to him and saying, excuse me, saying, okay, Jesus, you're getting the last drop, saying, Jesus, I'm starting to, and we got to be aware of the moment of what's going on. And Jesus, I'm starting to worry about this right now. What do you want me to know about it?
Oh, you're being honest?
And then to listen. Yeah. And then to listen. And my understanding of what obedience is really changed. It's not keeping a set of laws or whatever. It's doing what he asks you to say and do in that given moment. So if I go to him and say, oh, Jesus, I'm getting concerned. We're having to live stream the church. We don't have, people tend to not give unless they're there in person. What am I going to have an income next month or whatever? Then, I can go down that track. But if I stop and say, Jesus, here's what I'm thinking. What do you want? What are you saying to me? What do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? And then it's up to him. And I find him saying most of the time, come on, Paul, I've provided for you for 73 years. Remember when you, all these different times that he's provided income in ways that I never, ever would even imagine. I remember one time we were at a period of time when we weren't sure where our income was going to come from. And we had this friend who used to go to our church who's since moved away to another state. And he just was playing around one time. He had some time. He was playing around on the internet. He went to the state of Kansas and looked up unclaimed funds. And he found my name on the list. And he found that there was like $4,000 in an unclaimed fund from an insurance thing that I didn't even know that I got. And they sent it to the wrong address. And it had been there there for, you know, I don't know, 10, 15 years or something like that. And he did all the stuff for me, just showed me where to go. I sent that in and I got a check in a few days. And I'm thinking, you know, so what I've done, and this is just me, it may not be for anybody else, but I keep a list of all of those things. I got a couple of sheets of paper that are just totally full, front and back, of different times that God has provided for me in ways that I never could have even imagined. And so when I start to worry about something, generally he'll remind me of something like that. Or once in a great while,
reminds you of the previous provisions.
Yeah, once in a great while, he'll say, you know, go do this or go do that. And, you know, and there's maybe something that he wants me to do to bring about, to access the provision that he's given me. But most of the time it's just, you know, trust me in this.
My wife and I have experienced that our entire marriage. We've had crises come, we've had bills that were really high that hit us, blindsided us. And for some reason, out of the blue comes this other place where there's some cash that we didn't know about, or an extra check came in, or I don't know. You can't plan it. And people want to plan it. That's where I hear anxiety go up. They want to plan their next step in the event of a crisis. That's not how life works. You can't plan the next outcome. And so we've got this kind of record in our head of what we have seen, or at least the pattern of God's provision. So I even look at the Israelites in the Old Testament. They built up these rocks, these piles of rocks where God, they said, at this place, this is a reminder where God provided. And so for generations, the next bunch of generations that walk past this pile of rocks, they'll know what that is. So for you've got your list, and that's a way to remember, which gives you what do you call it? You have a you get to look at it and be reminded, oh my goodness, God is good. He does provide, and in ways I could never have planned. Will he come through again? I believe so.
Yeah. And, you know, and that's obviously that's called trust. And I'm learning that there's a big difference between belief and trust. I can believe that there's a God, and I can believe that he's good, but until I trust him to be good for me, to provide for me, to take care of me,
it needs a pattern, right?
Right.
So the Christianese phrase, you need to trust God, is almost unfair, right? Like when we tell people you need to trust God, I'm just thinking out loud now because of the way this conversation is going. It's not fair for us to impose a statement like that on people. We can, you know, the Bible does say trust the Lord your God, great, but to make it a guilt trip, no.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like there's a fine line here. There's two ways to see the same sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me a while to see where you're going, but yeah, that's true. And if you, it's hard to trust God if you don't have a track record of him providing.
Or if he's ticked off all the time.
Or if what?
If you think he's ticked off all the time.
Oh, of course, you're never gonna trust a God that's capricious and changes his mind and schizophrenic and does he like me today or not? You know. And,
well, you started off today by sharing part of your journey of faith, and how does that fit into the context of this crisis? If your concept of God is one who is distant, only helps out the good people, this crisis is going to scare the daylights out of you. But if you get to know this God that we say, the one we're talking about, the Abba Papa who lives in us, the full Trinity living in through us, as with us in every moment, feeling our feelings, whispering love and hope into our minds at all times, this crisis, we can get through this one, right? But if you get of course. God, oh my goodness, you're going to live your life based on your concept of who you think God is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why our perception, our concept of God really is everything. And it just is everything. And unfortunately, so many people have a wrong concept of what God is like.
Absolutely.
But you know what? During this crisis, you know, we obviously we have the opportunity, and this is what I've been saying to our folks here. We have the opportunity to go to people, anybody. First of all, if this is real for us, if we believe it, then other people are going to see us not worrying, not complaining, not catastrophizing.
They're going to see the peace of Christ in us and not be able to. Something's different.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And they're going to see, why aren't you worried about all this? Well, so then we have the opportunity to say, look, I've got this peace in me because I've come to understand that God is totally good. He's absolutely good. There's nothing bad about him. He's not angry. He loves us, and this is for you too. No, I mean, not just for me. This is for God. Has never been angry with you. He knew you before he created anything. He's always loved you. He's never been disappointed in you. He's for you in every possible way.
Of course, God's disappointed with us.
Well, people ask me that, and I say, well, look, God is omniscient. He knows everything. I mean, if he knows what you're going to do tomorrow, is he going to be disappointed that you do it? No. I mean,
it's expectation.
Yeah.
Disappointment means literally failed expectation.
Right. Exactly.
I had a couple walk out of my church service at the end of the service when I declared, God's not disappointed with you. They physically stood up, stormed out. They were ticked. But when you realize that God doesn't have an expectation on us, that we can actually just live day to day, even in this crisis, moment by moment, instant by instant, living while we abide. Catherine Toon just said something here online. I like this. It's an invitation to remember how wild he is about you. That is the reason we can trust. And I think that's a key. You were talking about that, like laying the foundation of who this God is we say we believe in.
Yeah. And when we have the opportunity, obviously, to do that all the time, but now in this situation, when we can say to somebody, he's wild about you. You may not have ever heard this. You may not even believe there is a God. You may not. You may believe differently. But let me tell you, he's wild about you. He loves you. He's always loved you. He's working all this out for the good, and there's nothing you can do to make him love you any more or any less. And to tell them that that's already true, as opposed to saying, well, you know, where are you going to go if you die tonight? That whole
fear mongering.
Yeah. And we have a completely different perspective of God, ourselves, and other people. And that gives not only me hope, but that gives everybody that we talk to hope. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll catch it and they'll understand it right away, but some will. Some, it's all a process, but it's a completely different way to relate to people, and it does give them absolute hope. Otherwise, they'll wonder, well, okay, did I really mean it when I said it, or did I get the right words, or whatever. All of those things. Yeah. The ultimate fear is fear of, I believe, fear of death. When you understand perfect love, cast that fear out, because you know that there's not going to be any punishment for you or for anybody else, because fear has to do with punishment and torment. When you understand perfect love, when you know perfect love, that fear is gone, and it changes everything. Well,
when you have fear, you're displaying that you're not free. Kyle Butler just wrote, if we're not free, we're not living. He's right. That's totally true. So, man, and Rainey, he says his love consumes us. Well, yes, and it's a fire that consumes us. It's a fire of his love. I think the hardest thing for me to learn and believe, not learn, but believe and trust, was that God is love. Because I always had the but attached to it. you know,
Yeah.
but also this, he's also that. But when I discovered the essence
Oh,
of
man.
God's DNA is agape,
Yeah.
other-centered, my trust for him grew, not because of a list I was checking, but because I began inside me to believe better and better. So I think when we want to, if you want to trust Jesus better, get to know him better.
Well, of
You
course,
better
yeah.
become a reality in us. It's not
Yeah.
a work, it's a
No.
result of belief.
Malcolm Smith helped me with that more than anybody else. You know, I've since got to know him, but before I got to know him, I just heard different people quote this from him. But you know, he said, you know, it's if I have water, I can run out of water, but if I am water, I will never run out of water. And God is love. He will never run out of love. It will never go away. It's
All right, there endeth the conversation for today. I pulled that clip out of an interview from 3 years ago. There's a lot more going on, but not his testimony stuff. But that was an encouraging conversation for me. I hope that was encouraging to you too. I wanted to give honor and tribute to my old friend Paul and Kitsy. Love you, and I love the group. I think the Facebook group is still going strong. They're still meeting regularly. Grace to all on Facebook. But anyway, that was what I wanted to do today, share that story, because there's a number of things I wanted to rehear. And actually, I caught some reminders today that I forgot about. Just maybe that's what I needed. I don't know. Well, hopefully you were encouraged by that as well. We're probably going to come back to the stuff we started last week, looking at those forgotten pieces of good news that we've learned. And Paul alluded to some of those today. Things that we transitioned or grew from. We can't forget some of those topics and themes and where we used to be in our faith journey. And I think when we do that, it helps us to be patient and caring with others. I like what he said. People who are religious are not the enemy. People who are religious are not the enemy. And I thought, oh man, that's sometimes hard to remember that, because we bump into folks that use religion as a legalistic tool to push people to do stuff and guilt them and shame them, but they still are not the enemy. That belief system is, and that's different. So I think we need to still see people as in, not out. I think we need to see people as loved, not can be loved if they say a special prayer. That was really cool. Anyway, that's all I got today. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Share this with anybody that would value hearing a really cool testimony. We will catch you next time.
Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.